Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the session 4 of the Holistic Health Series, where presenter Reena will be introducing us to mindfulness meditation. This event is hosted by the University Health Network's Red Blood Cell Disorders Clinic. Today is the fourth session of a five-part series for people with families, friends, and caregivers impacted by sickle cell disease, thalassemia, and other red blood cell disorders. The focus is on supporting mental health and well-being from a holistic lens. I'm Colleen, and I'm the nurse practitioner at Toronto General, and I will be co-hosting today's session.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sindhu, and I'm a social worker also at Toronto General's Red Blood Cell Disorders Clinic. So we would like to open with a land acknowledgement. And we do this to recognize the lands that we are on, as well as to identify and confront colonization and white supremacy on Turtle Island. So we're meeting on a virtual space here today. So I encourage you to reflect on the lands that you're joining us from. And today, I'm speaking from the RBCD clinic, which operates in what is colonially known as Toronto. This land is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabe Nation, including the Mississauga of the New Credit and the Wendat and other Indigenous nations since time immemorial. Today, this land is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people.
Long before this land was stolen, it was and continues to be protected by the dish with one spoon, an agreement among allied Indigenous nations to share and care for the land and resources around the Great Lakes. This land is also subject to the Geswantha, an agreement originally made between the Haudenosaunee and the Dutch. The Geswantha is a living treaty that articulates relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples based on peace, friendship, non-interference, and respect for each other's ways.
So I wanted to reflect and share that I come to this land as the child of Tamil immigrants and refugees from Sri Lanka. This land has provided refuge for my family and also an opportunity to go to school and work. I reflect and that many Indigenous peoples don't share in those privileges due to the ongoing legacy of colonization. I am committed to learn about the ongoing impacts of colonialism, and I come with respect and reverence for the land.
And I am of settler colonial ancestry. My great-great-grandparents came from England, Scotland, and Ireland to Canada. My family has lived and worked on Indigenous land and reaped those benefits. While farming the land, my father would bring across Indigenous artifacts and show those to his children, reminding us that we are not the first to inhabit and live off the land. I acknowledge and continue to learn about the impacts of colonization and respect this land that I am on today and for the people who have and do reside here. We also acknowledge that anti-Black racism persists in healthcare, education, housing, child welfare, employment, immigration, and justice systems. These systemic inequities can be directly traced to the legacy of the enslavement of African and African descent peoples, which happened in Canada. We also recognize the excellence of Black communities, including resistance as well as contributions to Canadian society. Today, when we talk about mental health, we ground the series on how anti-Black racism and oppression impact well-being and access to care. I am now thrilled to welcome Reena Ruparelia, who will be continuing the series with a presentation on mindfulness meditation, with a focus for people with sickle cell and thalassemia and other red blood cell disorders, as well as their supports. Reena is a mindfulness advocate and psoriasis warrior who has dedicated her life to helping others find peace and healing through the practice of mindfulness. After being diagnosed with psoriasis, a chronic autoimmune disease that affects the skin, Reena turned to mindfulness meditation as a way to manage the stress and anxiety associated with the condition. Please join me in welcoming Reena.
So much, Colleen and Sindhu. I'm just going to share my screen. Hello, everyone joining. Right. Perfect. Just need one more second. I'll pull the chat up here. Okay. Good evening. It is an absolute honor and pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. As mentioned, I'm Reena Ruparelia, a wellness advocate and a mindfulness guide. And I'm going to take you through today's session, an introduction to mindfulness and mindfulness meditation. And I'll share a little bit more about my health journey in the coming slides. But as we begin, of course, I want to say thank you to Sindhu, Colleen, and James, who's not with us tonight, but this opportunity to be here again is an honor. And of course, the Red Blood Cell Disorders Clinic for creating this 5-part series. I also want to welcome each and every one of you attending today who are living with sickle cell, thalassemia, and other red blood cell disorders, as well as their supports. Thank you for being here. And I hope this session will be of benefit to you and you'll be able to take some things away that you can add to your self-care toolkit. So what are we going to cover today? So during today's session, if you actually have attended the first 3, I know my colleague Aisha Santish covered more in part 1 around what is mental health. Part 2, she also talked about intersectionality and mental health. And finally, in part 3, she talked about how to stay in the green when it comes to your mental health. So during this part, we're going to explore the topic of mindfulness. So maybe in the chat, if it's accessible to you, maybe you can tell me, have you ever heard of mindfulness? Do you know what it is? Just so I can get a feel for the group. So have you heard of it? Do you know what it is? Yes or no would work. So as you're doing that, yeah, okay, great. So no matter, your experience or familiarity with this topic, today we're going to go through, perfect, yeah. We're going to go through what mindfulness is, what it isn't. We'll explore why and how it can be of benefit to you, as well as I've sprinkled some simple practices throughout the session that we can all try out together. And then again, as mentioned by Sindhu, we will take time at the end of the session to answer questions. But during this time, you can just communicate through the chat. And to begin, we're going to actually dive into a practice, just so that we can all kind of ground and come into this space together. I know we're all joining from different places and spaces, so maybe a lot has happened in your day today, depending on how you're feeling. This will just give you a moment to ground and check in with you. So a mindful check-in is a short formal practice, right? It's checking in with how you're doing at this moment. You can think of it like taking a read on your internal weather, right? Your internal temperature, noticing physical sensations, any thoughts that you might be having, as well as any emotions that may be present for you. These 3 areas, right, are physical sensations, our thoughts, as well as our emotions, provide a direct connection to our lived experience. And they're a resource that's always available to us during mindfulness practice. So when we check in this way that we're about to, the aim is to reconnect with yourself, to reboot and rebalance the body and the mind. It's also strategic in that you move your attention around in specific ways that may help you get unstuck from unhelpful thought patterns or even automatic routines. So let's try it, okay? And again, being patient with yourself, perhaps meeting this practice with curiosity. If you haven't done a meditation like this before or a check-in, just following my instructions. And again, trying to kind of keep it light for yourself. So just to begin, I'm going to invite you to just, wherever you're sitting, just to kind of sit up straight. If you're in a chair like me, you can plant both your feet on the floor. If you're sitting on a cushion or the floor, you can allow both sit bones to kind of press into the ground. And if it's comfortable for you, I invite you to close your eyes. If not, feel free to just gaze down at a spot that you can focus on so that you can keep your attention on what I'm saying. I invite you to straighten your back. It can be straight but not stiff. Allow your shoulders to roll up to the ears and gently down and back. If you're holding any tension in your jaw, maybe allow your tongue to hang heavy. Just unhook the jaw, soften the stomach. Maybe unfurl your eyebrows, soften the eyes and eye sockets, even your forehead. Perhaps tucking the chin, letting the back of your neck gently rise up. Getting into this posture will signal to your brain that you're doing something different, so you'll pay attention. The air also flows in and out a little easier this way. So when you're ready, emptying the air out of the body. And when you're ready, breathing in through the nose or the mouth, a little bit deeper than you normally do. Feeling the body expand on the inhale and breathing out, allowing the air to leave the body. Again, breathing in through the nose or the mouth. Fresh, clean oxygen. And as you breathe out, letting it go. Allow your breath to return to its natural pace. Before we check in, take a moment to appreciate yourself for taking the time to be here and making the space. It's rare that we get to take time to check in this way, to pause and to breathe. So just thanking yourself for that today. Now, when you're ready, taking the lens of your attention and maybe even bringing a sense of curiosity to your body. Just noticing, as perhaps you scan the body from head to toe, what sensations are present? What's calling for your attention? Maybe there's subtle sensations or more loud, expressed sensations. Maybe a tightness in your knee, a tingling in the hip. Maybe you're feeling the floor beneath your feet. But trying to feel maybe what's happening inside the body. Any stiffness, tightness. Not judging it, but instead just noting what's calling for your attention. What do you notice? Now slowly taking this attention from the body and coming into your thoughts, your mind. Try to see what you're thinking right now. You don't need to judge the thought, but what are you thinking? What thoughts are coming up for you? Maybe you're thinking about something that happened earlier today or what you need to do after this. Maybe thinking about what we're doing right now. Just try and notice what thought is coming up or what different thoughts come, and maybe even looking at them as passing clouds as they come up and pass. What are you thinking? Knowing that there's no right or wrong thoughts. No need to judge, just be curious. What thoughts am I thinking right now? Finally, bringing some of this attention now into your emotional self, your feelings. What emotions, what feelings are present for you right now? And even if you can't name them, maybe you can just sense into how you're doing. Maybe you're feeling joyful or happy, maybe a little sad, tired, worried. Again, no feeling is right or wrong. Our feelings, just like our thoughts and body sensations, are constantly changing. So what are you feeling right now, knowing that there may be more than one feeling present? Just curious here to see how am I feeling? Now letting the attention move from your emotions and coming back to the breath, allowing your attention to focus on the breath coming in and out of the body. So just feeling the breath as it comes in and as it goes out. Just taking a moment to ground as you feel the breath coming in and out. Before we close this practice, I just want you to again, perhaps acknowledge yourself for your willingness to show up, to be present for yourself, and know that you are contributing to your wholeness and well-being by taking a moment to breathe and check in. So just thanking yourself, if that feels good for you. And when you're ready, you can begin to move the body, wiggle fingers and toes, and then flutter your eyes open or away, bringing them from where you were looking back to the screen. Just taking your time. Wonderful. So this mindful check-in you can do at any time. You begin by, again, focusing on the breath and then coming in to just saying, what do I feel in my body right now, right? What sensations are present? What thoughts are here? And what am I feeling? And I like to just write them on a paper. I'll check in sometimes in the morning when I wake up, sometimes middle of the day, and then at the end of the day. So 3 times. And over time, you start to build a connection and a deeper awareness. So perhaps, again, I will ask you, what did you notice during the mindful check-in? What was something you noticed? Maybe you noticed a sensation. Maybe you noticed something else. If you feel good, maybe you can share in the chat, or if you feel comfortable, rather. What was that like for you? I know for me, I noticed that I was feeling light and, sometimes I feel really heavy. So I noticed this evening I'm feeling a lot lighter. Um, and so my breath was coming in and out really easily. All right. So like I said, anxiety, yeah, a little bit of anxiety, worry sometimes, anxiety. Thank you for sharing. Felt some feelings in my stomach, but mostly light. Okay. Yeah. Again, we start to really connect. A lot of the time we're just living from our neck up. Yeah. And our minds are racing. It's hard sometimes to watch the thought, right? Because we're used to kind of following them. And this is perfectly normal. And again, like many of us are living. But as we start to check in, we start to become more aware. And I'll talk about how to work with some of these things that we're noticing in a little while. But when we do a formal practice like this mindful check-in, as I mentioned, we develop awareness around what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and what we're experiencing. And when living with a health condition, right, it can be a useful way for us to step into the present moment and be with our experience. Sometimes it's a bit overwhelming, but eventually, right, we start to get more present and then we start to take what we're feeling, we give ourselves what we need, or we attend to ourselves in a different way. And so I wanted to share a little bit more about me, although, we don't live with the same condition, I can appreciate the challenges, right, of living with a chronic health condition. And as mentioned, I live with a chronic inflammatory skin condition called psoriasis, which expresses itself as red scales all over my body. And like many of you, I assume, I've experienced physical limitations and how that can negatively impact, right, the day and the daily activities and what we have planned, how long sometimes it takes to get things done, or the weight that physical symptoms have, things like chronic pain, fatigue, feeling weak, and the toll that they take on the body and the mind, even the emotional self. Plus the challenges, I know this really well, around feeling lonely, stressed, socially isolated, and the stigma of living with the condition. I know for me, because mine's visible, I know a lot of people were afraid to touch me. I lived with a lot of shame and had very low self-esteem. And so for me, I've been living with my condition for going on 30 years now. I can't believe it. And most of those years were spent alone, ashamed, frustrated, angry, often asking myself, why me? Why me? And this condition, as I mentioned, caused lots of pain on all levels. And my relationship to my condition, right? How I was living, it held me back from trying new things, meeting new people, following my dreams. I really felt limited because I was so overwhelmed by the experience of living with psoriasis and frustrated with my situation. And as the years, began to go on and I lived with this condition for periods of time, my skin and my mental health continued to worsen, right? At, about, I'd say 10, 15 years ago, I just gave up on treatment completely. I got to this point that I could no longer cope. I could no longer live in the way that I was living. And I just want to say, just a warning, that the next image might be shocking or triggering to some of you. So I just want to let you know, in case you want to look away from the screen. Of course, no problem. But I'll let you know once I've moved past the slide if you want to bring your attention back. But I just want to show you, after all this neglect, my skin got to the point of no return. And at this point, I was wearing plastic gloves to work. As I said, I wasn't taking my treatment. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was not managing my condition, and things got really bad. And I ended up, this picture on the left, I just had a panic attack at work. And it's very odd that I took a picture, but I just remember something was so different and I couldn't believe that I had gotten this sick. And I was forced to take a disability leave. And it was really hard because I was forced to sit with all my pain. There was no way for me to distract anymore. The thoughts, the shame, the body sensations, just very, very overwhelming as I was bedridden. I couldn't even bend my fingers. I remember even trying to hold a steering wheel, my skin would crack and it would bleed. I couldn't wash my hair. I was kind of just stuck. And I became desperate, right? I began looking for anything that could help. And the first thing I did was I went back to my dermatologist and I went back on treatment, which helped. But I knew I needed to do more, and I needed to help myself in a holistic way. And so I started looking for things that I could do, other ways that I could help myself. And that's when I stumbled upon meditation and mindfulness. My first experience with meditation was a 10-day silent retreat. I could have downloaded an app, right? But I decided to go all the way in, and I went fully covered in psoriasis. It was quite the experience. And I'm not going to say, starting to meditate or taking courses around mindfulness or becoming more mindful, it wasn't a quick fix that just alleviated my pain or cured my skin. But mindfulness offered me something else. And that was a fresh perspective, right? A way of being that helped me relate to myself, my struggle, and my condition in a different way. And instead of being judgmental of myself, I started to get more curious, right? That's one of the pillars of mindfulness, curiosity. Instead of being mean and self-deprecating, putting myself down, I started to look at myself with more kindness, more compassion, more empathy. I started to see that I was struggling and that this wasn't my fault, right? This was something I was experiencing, and I was deserving of my own care just as much as I would care for others. And as the months went on and I started to shift my perspective, I began to feel a little bit better, a little bit more grounded, a little bit more in my body and accepting of my condition and where I was. And this really started to shift my life. I often think of the Wayne Dyer quote, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. I've changed the slide now. If you were looking away, I invite you to come back. But I'm happy to say that almost, after 10 years of starting my mindfulness journey, I've been able to shift my perspective on myself, my condition, and what's possible for me. I feel grateful to say that I'm now an advocate for people living with the condition, which is a far cry from someone who is hiding and isolated. I run a community for over 18,000 people living with the condition worldwide, and recently been featured in Women's Health. And the bottom picture here is a picture that I had for a Dove Beauty, Real Beauty campaign, which was a huge accomplishment. And on the top here, I was working with little ones and helping them, again, start to accept themselves. A lot of the lessons that I learned later in life, hoping to instill this in the younger generation. So if they encounter difficulties, they're able to be more gentle with themselves. But for me, it's not obviously about the accomplishments or what I've done per se, but it's who I've become along the way. By becoming more mindful, I woke up to my life and I started to I started to take care of myself and also learn ways to soothe myself, tools and techniques to really help shift my view on how my life was and what I thought about myself and what I thought I deserved. And that has led to, a very different life for me. So that's a little bit about my story. I know we all have our stories. Thank you for listening and allowing me to share that. I hope that it was helpful. And I'll get more into talking about what is mindfulness. Okay, so I like to use this picture here as a good way to really know what it means to be mindful. So you'll see on the left here, mindful. Right. So what, maybe even if you feel like answering this in the chat, but what do you see on the left here? What do you see? Someone walking, and this is how a lot of us are, right? In our minds, we may be in a beautiful park. Yeah. So I see clutter, right? Mental clutter. A lot of us, we have lots of thoughts, concerns, there's distractions, overload. The mind's preoccupied with multiple thoughts and worries simultaneously, right? We're thinking about the past, about the future, what we need to do, what we haven't done. And that can lead to us feeling, an increased amount of stress. We have difficulty focusing and even a state of overwhelm. Yeah, too much on one's mind. I'm also seeing, yeah, absolutely. A lot on the mind. There's, we think about 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And the research shows that about 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts that we had the day before. So we're just turning over the same thoughts in our mind day after day. And then on the right, we see this person's dog. And what do we see here? It seems like the dog is where they are. It's exactly what you see. So that's what you can kind of look at mindfulness as, right? A state of being aware and attentive to the present moment. And of course, I'm going to add here without judgment. That's a big one. It involves, consciously paying attention to our thoughts, our feelings, and our body sensations, but also the surrounding environment. This is kind of like what we did during our mindful check-in. So practicing mindfulness involves cultivating a non-reactive and accepting mindset, right? We observe experiences as they come up, and we stay fully engaged in the present moment. And this takes practice, of course, but it is achievable and attainable. So the formal definition of mindfulness, which I love, is it's our basic human ability to be fully present, right? It's a basic human ability. It's not a superhuman ability. It's something that's accessible to each and every one of us. And it means we're aware of where we are and what we're doing without being overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us or even inside of us. And what happens when we're not mindful, right? We're living on autopilot. Autopilot is this default mode, right? It's the way that we're operating in our daily lives when we're when we're often navigating our experience without conscious awareness or even any intention, right? So when we get up in the morning, a lot of us are on autopilot. We do the same thing. So for me, it's maybe waking up, brushing my teeth, washing my face, checking my phone, having my coffee, kind of starting. And I'm sure the thoughts in my mind are the same, but I'm doing the same thing over and over again with no real awareness or even intentionality. And that can involve us again being lost in our minds, in our thoughts, and habitual patterns of reactivity, and again continuing to do the same things over and over again. And that can prevent us from fully being where we are and engaging in the present moment. And when it comes to, you can see here, it's necessary for routine activities for us to kind of have a default mode. We don't want to relearn how to brush our teeth or to drive a car or to use the computer. It helps us get things done on default mode. But when we're dealing with things like pain, strong emotions, difficult thoughts, it can cause issues, right? When we continue to operate in ways that are unhelpful or keep us stuck in the same loops day in and day out. So when we become more mindful, what happens is we learn to press pause, right? We step out of autopilot and we consciously choose to redirect our attention to the present moment. And by practicing things like the mindful check-in and some other things that we'll do today, we can gradually train ourselves to spend less time, on autopilot and more time fully engaged in our experiences. And this allows us to develop a greater sense of presence, awareness, and also this ability to consciously choose how we respond to the circumstances in our lives. And I think that's a really important piece, right? It's not only to pause, but it's then to be able to make different choices, to be able to, again, when we're having a moment where we're feeling really low, it's to pause and say, oh, I'm having a low moment, taking a moment to ground, to be here, but then making a choice on how we choose to respond to that. Mindfulness gives us that space to pause. Just one second. Excuse me. So I wanted to share this quote, which I think kind of summarizes this perfectly. And this is by Viktor Frankl. And he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which you may have read. And he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And so when something difficult happens, right, or a stimulus happens, something happens, and we're on autopilot, we, completely just move into autopilot and respond or react the way we normally do. But with mindfulness, with a moment of mindfulness, we get a moment to pause in the middle, and then we get a moment to then consciously choose how we want to respond. So it just gives us space and a moment to do that. So another way rather to step out of autopilot is this exercise, which you may have tried before, called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And this is an exercise where we engage our senses. And this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise can be particularly useful when we feel worried, right? Anxious, when we feel disconnected from ourselves, from our surroundings. By focusing on our immediate sensory experience, we're able to anchor ourselves in the present moment. And that's going to help us promote a sense of calm and even grounding. And although, these techniques that I'm teaching today and sharing are recommended for tough times, I think it's important to note that it's important to practice these on a regular basis, especially when you're not feeling too overwhelmed or too anxious, just to get familiar with it so that you're kind of able to try these out in a more comfortable pace at a comfortable speed, so that when you do have strong emotions, strong body sensations, or you need a moment to pause, you're able to call on these as a resource. But again, want to say, it takes practice and time to build familiarity and comfortability. All right, so let's try it. And I'm going to guide you through it. So feel free to just be curious, explore, and try as best as you can to connect with the surroundings around you. So just taking a moment to settle in again to a comfortable position, maybe taking a couple of breaths deeper than usual. And what I want you to do now is I want you to look around the space you're in. Just look around the room you're in, the space you're in. And I want you to identify 5 things that you can see. 5 things that you can see. Maybe colors, shapes, just items you haven't seen before. So just noting those silently to yourself. 5 items, okay? So just noting those, looking around. So I'm going to do it with you. Next, we're going to move into 4. So we're going to pay attention to 4 things that we can touch or feel. Right? So this could be the sensation of your feet on the ground. It could be something close by that you can touch, a texture of an object, the clothes against your skin. What are 4 things you can touch? So going out and just reaching out to things that you can touch and just naming them as you do it. All right. Next, this one takes a little bit more focus for me, but 3 things you can hear. So it might be the humming of an appliance, my voice, your breath. Just taking a moment to notice 3 sounds. And again, if you can only find 2, that's okay. Just be curious here. Can you notice 3 sounds? I had to make a sound because I can only hear 2. So that's 3 things you can hear. Number 2, 2 things you can smell. So again, it may be a smell from around you, such as, the air, a flower, or you could even bring something close to you and smell it, an object, if you feel like, you can't smell 2 things. I, again, find this one a little more challenging, so I'm going to do that. And finally, become aware of one thing you can taste. So if there's something you can eat or drink, maybe you'll take a small sip or bite. Just notice the flavor, or just become aware of that natural taste in your mouth. All right. So just taking a breath in and out. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So using your senses to anchor your attention in the present moment. That's the invitation with this exercise, and you can use this at any time. I also like to do this sometimes on the bus when I don't want to be on my phone scrolling or walking down the street, kind of looking for everything I can see that's green, or things that I can smell, things that I can hear. It really helps ground me when I feel like the breath is overwhelming or body sensations are overwhelming. So you may call on that to help you. Even just focusing on one of your senses at a time can also be helpful. So if you want to share something you've noticed in the chat, I'd love to read them. What's something you noticed? What's something you saw, you touched, you smelled, you tasted? If you're watching this at a later time, maybe noting it down in a notebook. So I wanted to go through just a few misconceptions about mindfulness and mindfulness meditation. And you'll see that the 2 exercises that we did, are simple, but they're not always easy. right? It doesn't always come naturally to be mindful, especially in a world where many of us are distracted, with technology on our phones, with so much going on, and it requires practice. So it's just noticing what happens, including the things we find difficult, of course. But although these instructions are simple, the practices can sometimes feel challenging. The other thing I want to share is it's not about emptying the mind. Sometimes people will sit in meditation and they'll say to me, well, I can't stop thinking, right? There's so many thoughts. And I want to say it's not about not thinking, right? Our mind is going to produce thoughts. That's what they're built for, right? Our minds are going to keep producing thoughts even when we're meditating, which is not like, I wish there was a switch to turn them off, but it's not like we can do that. As mentioned, we have these 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. But what happens when we're mindful is instead of getting caught up in these thoughts, we learn to observe the thoughts, right? Again, we practice observing thoughts, which takes time. We don't let them take us on a ride, but we just observe. The other thing I want to say is it's not religious, exotic, or obscure. Mindfulness is a basic human ability, as I mentioned earlier, right? A human inheritance, a capability. And although it has Eastern roots, it's not owned by any group, religion, or philosophy. Mindfulness isn't something we do. We don't do mindfulness, but instead it's a way of being, right? It's a way of being patient, about being more kind, compassionate to ourselves, curious, non-judgmental. You can be mindful doing anything in your life. It's just how you are while you're doing it. So if you think of a simple example of brushing your teeth, when we're mindful, maybe we think about the sensation of the toothbrush on our teeth, the taste of the toothpaste. We look at ourselves doing it. We're present with the experience of brushing our teeth. Where, if we weren't mindful or present, we would be thinking, right? Just brushing our teeth, thinking, what do I got to do next? What do I got to do next? So much of the time, that's what I'm doing. But when mindfulness is a way of being, and you can do it while you're doing anything, but it's how you are while you're doing it. It's not a quick fix. I wish. It's not a quick way to fix our problems, although it can help soothe sadness, help with worry and pain. It's not going to fix them, but instead help us learn to relate to our experience in a new way. We relate to the things that trouble us in a new way rather than try to make them go away. So having a mindfulness practice is about retraining our minds so that we can cope with the challenges that we experience. I love the quote, you can't control the waves, right? You can't control the waves, but you can learn how to surf. That's by John Kabat-Zinn. So you can't control the waves, but you can learn how to surf. And I think mindfulness gives us that ability. And the last thing is it doesn't take a lot of time. So just 10 minutes a day spent practicing being mindful can help you feel better, can help you feel more present and more in your body, in your mind, in your life. And like I said, you can do this if you don't have time to sit, or you don't like sitting in a meditation, or it's not something that feels good for your body. You can do it while doing anything, drinking a glass of water, again, bringing your senses into it, feeling your breath as it comes in and out. Or you can do it while brushing your teeth, taking a shower, speaking with somebody. It's just trying to be present and focus on where you are and what you're doing. All right. So the next part of our practices, we're going to move into a breath practice. And breath is a powerful tool, right? It's a way to instantly reset our nervous system, a wonderful way to reset our nervous system. And we're going to do a breath called the 2-to-1 breath. And this is where we double our exhale to our inhale. And when you do that, when you lengthen your exhale, that starts to put the nervous system into rest and relax versus this fight, flight, freeze. So let's just try it out. I just want you to count your in-breath, and that's all we need to do. So just emptying the air out of the lungs. And when you breathe in, just count how many seconds does it take you to breathe in a fuller than usual breath, just to your peak, whatever that is, right? So breathing in and just counting. Okay, breathe out So for me, my breath in was 4 counts. Yours might be 3, 5, 6, whatever it is. All I want you to do for this breath is I'd like you to try and make your exhale longer than your inhale. So for me, if I breathed in for 4, my goal would be to breathe out for 8. But if I breathe out for 6, that's okay too. So just again, being a little flexible with yourself. So if you breathed in for 3, breathing out for 6. And when you breathe out, you really want to let the breath crawl out of the body. So I like to do it through pursing my lips or pretending like I'm blowing out a birthday candle. That's going to really help you slow down the breath and allow the body again to kind of reap the benefits of that. So let's just try this together. We're going to do it for about a minute. So it doesn't matter how many breaths you have. And if you don't want to close your eyes, actually, something I like to do, I'll just demonstrate. So when I'm breathing in, I'll breathe in for a count of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So lifting my hands up. And when I breathe out, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All while blowing out through the mouth. So again, you can breathe in through the nose or mouth, whatever's accessible for you tonight, but then trying to breathe out through the mouth. So doubling your exhale to your inhale. So let's try this. So sitting up straight, not stiff, emptying the air out of the lungs, and then breathing in for your count, whatever that is. Out the mouth, slowing the breath down. Breathing in for your count. And breathing out. Breathing in. And breathing out when you're ready. Slow, slow exhale. There's no rush. Just doing 2 more rounds. Breathing in. Breathing out. Last round. Breathing in. Breathing out. Just allowing your breath to return to normal. See how you feel. I think I must be breathing shallow today. Many of us are shallow chest breathers, and that can cause us to feel worried, anxious. And so when we take deeper than usual breaths, sometimes we can feel a little lightheaded. So allowing yourself to kind of see how you're doing, maybe just allowing the breath to return back to normal. A wonderful time to do this breath specifically is when you're feeling stressed, right? Because it calms your nervous system. The other time that I do this is I do this before I go to sleep at night. So if I'm having trouble sleeping, which sometimes happens, perhaps for you as well, it's a breath that I allow to ground myself. Sometimes people count to sheep, but I like to just breathe this 2-to-1 breath. It has a beautiful effect on the nervous system. So definitely try it out and see if it's something that you want to continue to use. If you balance your breath, right? So let's say you breathe in for 4 and you breathe out for 4. That can help kind of put you in a more neutral state, right? So I like to just do a balanced breath in the middle of the day, just to kind of check in, get some oxygen into my body, but that'll balance out your nervous system. That'll balance out your brain and your body. All right. So I've talked a lot about the benefits just through my story and through other things, but I'll just quickly go through these before we move into a longer form meditation. So I know, again, when I've talked about the benefits through this presentation and when I've studied them, there are some benefits when we're living with chronic conditions and living in pain, with pain at times. And although mindfulness may not directly address our underlying physiological concerns, it can positively impact our well-being and our quality of life. The first way that I found really noticeable in my own life and then with people that I work with is a reduction in stress, right? We know that when we're living with a health condition, it can be challenging and stressful. And mindfulness techniques such as deep breathing, mindful check-in, meditation can help reduce our stress levels and even promote relaxation in the body. And when we cultivate a greater sense of calm, we can experience a decrease in the physiological and psychological effects of stress. It can also help when we're working with pain, right, and pain management. And it's my understanding that in certain red blood cell disorders, such as sickle cell disease, it can cause chronic pain. And with mindfulness, we learn to start observing our pain without judgment. And we start to develop a more non-reactive, compassionate attitude, which can start to help us reduce pain intensity and even improve our ability to manage the discomfort at times. It can add to emotional well-being, right? Dealing with a chronic health condition can often lead to emotional challenges like anxiety, depression, frustration. Mindfulness encourages us to become more aware of these emotions, thoughts, and sensations. And when we start to cultivate this attitude of kindness, self-compassion, and acceptance, it can help us navigate our emotional experiences with more tact, with more awareness, and even help us build resilience over time. And also improve the quality of our sleep. I know that, sleep patterns can be disrupted and there's lots of complications that comes with that. So when we use mindfulness techniques like this 2-to-1 breath that we did, it can promote relaxation in the body and improve our sleep quality, which when we have a better sleep, that can help us feel a little bit better and contribute to our well-being and our ability to cope with challenges. So we're going to move into the next section, which is a body scan. And I'm not going to do a whole body scan, but we're going to focus on just 4 different parts of the body. So it's a little bit edited. And if you join for our next session, I'll do a longer form body scan. But a body scan meditation is when we focus on certain parts of the body and bring our attention to that part. It's a wonderful way to reconnect with ourselves and become more alert to the signs and the signals that our bodies are giving us. I know for me, when I was living with my skin condition, it was really flaring. And when it does, actually, I was living with it recently, my eyes were flaring up. And it was really hard for me to focus on this area. So I really had to work on, like, if I was doing a body scan and my eyes were calling for my attention, but I was focusing on my elbow. Oh gosh, it was just very, very frustrating and really difficult. So I was going to say, if you are having strong sensations today in an area that I call you to focus on and it doesn't feel good, feel free to just do some breaths and just ignore my instructions. Okay. I just want you to do what feels right for you and meet yourself where you are at all times. It's very, very important when doing these types of practices because this is for you versus needing to achieve or accomplish anything. But when we start to sit in things like meditation, right, when we're getting just started, our body can grow anxious, it can grow restless, agitated, bored. I want to say it's normal, right, to kind of feel these things, especially when we're always on the go. When we go from kind of go, 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 and just stopping, right, trying to just observe our body, our thoughts, it can be kind of overwhelming. So this is all normal. Like I said, feel free to breathe or do something that feels good for you. Just give yourself the gift of being present with yourself. The most important thing, I think, is to notice when you're doing a meditation, it's not to clear the mind of thoughts, but if we're focusing, let's say, on a certain part of our body and you're participating in this meditation, and you notice that the mind has wandered and you're thinking about eating or you're thinking about something that happened earlier today, just noticing that the mind has wandered is mindfulness. It's like, oh, I lost track of what I was doing. I'm not here. Let me bring my mind back. And you gently escort your attention back. You don't need to judge yourself saying, I'm good at this, I'm bad at this. You can just say, oh, my attention wandered. Let me gently bring it back. Sometimes I just giggle at myself. It's okay. It's okay. We don't need to be perfect. We just do our best. So let's try this out. I'm going to guide you through. And again, meeting yourself where you are. No right or wrong, no good or bad. It just is what it is. Okay. So maybe just taking a little shake. I like to do that. Whatever feels good for your body. If you feel good to just shake off what we've done before, what we got to do after. And let's get into a mindful posture, right? Like we talked about, a posture that signals to your brain that you're doing something different. So if you're slouching, I invite you to sit up straight. You don't need to be stiff, but finding a posture that feels relaxed and awake. If you're in a chair or couch, just plant your feet equally onto the ground, maybe even pressing your feet down into the floor or the carpet. Feel the earth supporting you or the floor supporting you. This will also help you root those sit bones down into the chair, or even if you're sitting on the ground, just feeling the support of the floor, the chair, or the cushion underneath you. And on your next in-breath, I invite you to breathe in and allow the shoulders to come up to the ears. Hold them here for a moment. And as you breathe out, allow the shoulders to drop down and back, maybe even feeling them melt down away from the ears. And breathing in, bringing the shoulders up. And as you release, allowing the shoulders to fall down and back away from the ears. And if it feels good for you, I'm going to invite you to rub your hands together. Just create some heat. Allow your hands to get warm. And if it's safe and comfortable for you, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and take the palms of your hand and put them over your eyes. Again, if you're not doing this, you can just gaze at a spot down on the ground and allow your hands to rest on your lap. But if you are joining me, maybe doing small circular motions around your eyes. Our eyes work hard every day with all the screens and the straining. So perhaps allowing the eyes to feel this heat, softening the eyeballs, behind the eyes, the eye sockets. Just feeling the heat as you slowly and gently massage the eyes. When you're ready, you can bring the hands down to the lap, to your lap. You can keep your eyes closed, or again, gaze down at a spot in front of you on the ground. And just invite a sense of presence and maybe even ease into the body. And when you're ready, let's take some deeper than usual breaths. So emptying the air out of the lungs and then breathing in through the nose or mouth, breathing in to a comfortable peak, holding for one moment. On the exhale, let's sigh out. And as you breathe in, reach the spine up. And as you breathe out, sighing out the mouth, relax. One more time, breathing in, fresh, clean oxygen into the body. And as you breathe out, letting the air leave. Allowing the breath to return to its natural flow, its natural pace. Just feel yourself sitting here, whole body breathing. Maybe you feel where the breath is coming in to the body and you focus on that part. So maybe that's the tip of your nostrils or your lips. So just feeling the breath coming in and then going out. Coming in, going out. Not manipulating or changing the breath, just allowing the body to be breathed as you observe the breath as it enters the body and as it leaves. And if the mind wanders, bringing it back to just feeling the breath coming in and going out. So we're going to take our attention into a few areas of our body. And the first thing I want you to do is bring your attention, or the lens of your attention, to your feet, both your left and your right foot. You might even want to scrunch them up into a little ball if that's accessible for you, and then release. And just notice what sensations are present for you. Perhaps even sensing from the inside of the feet. You maybe even focusing on one foot at a time. What do you notice in your left foot? What do you notice in your right foot? Is there tingling, tightness, numbness? Maybe you feel nothing. Maybe you can feel the ground beneath you or the air between your toes. What do you feel on the inside of your feet? Again, focusing on one foot at a time if that feels better for you. So let's just take a moment here. And again, when the mind wanders, just notice it's wandered and bring it back to focusing on the sensations in your feet. Placing your attention from your feet and slowly traveling up the bottom of your legs, from the knees, up through the thighs, your seat, pelvis, and stop your attention at your stomach. And if you feel that you're maybe gripping here, a lot of us hold emotion and stress here. I invite you to soften the stomach and the belly. And now notice what you feel in this area of your stomach. What sensations are here? You can even place your hand on your stomach if that feels good for you. Just see what you can notice inside of the stomach area. And is there tingling, throbbing? Do you feel pulsing? Again, maybe there's nothing at all. Just noting that too. It's all welcome. It's all okay. What's here? Being curious and patient. Now, slowly drifting the attention up the sternum, the chest, and let's stop at the heart. Again, you can place your hands on your heart if that feels good for you. And as you're breathing in and out, just notice, what can you feel in your chest or heart area? Maybe you can feel the beating or the thumping of your chest. Or if your hand is here, maybe you even feel your chest coming up and down. What's present for you as you breathe here and focus on the heart center or the chest? What sensations are present? Finally, moving the attention up through the collarbone area, the neck, and let's stop at the jaw. And if you're gripping your jaw, again, many of us have a lot of tension here. See if you can unhook the jaw. I just like to let my bottom lip hang heavy and my tongue to get a bit heavy. Maybe even opening the mouth. And just see if you can notice any sensations in your jaw. Again, being curious and patient if nothing's arising immediately. What do you notice? Now releasing the attention from the jaw and allowing yourself to take a deeper than usual breath. Breathing in, breathing out. And just again, sense your whole body sitting here. And perhaps even scanning from head to toe and noticing any sensations as you move from your head or the tip of your scalp down your body. Maybe even focusing on the jaw and the heart and the stomach and the feet. Feel the world of sensations that are happening right here. And knowing that each and every one of us is having a different experience in this moment. So let's just take a moment before we come back to the session to appreciate. Take a moment to appreciate the body that you scanned, perhaps even thanking our bodies for all that they do, even though sometimes can feel difficult. But just maybe even whispering to your body, thank you, thank you, thank you. Taking a moment to appreciate the breath. We take about 20,000 breaths a day without thought. Our body breathes itself, our lifelong companion, our breath. So thanking our breath. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And always appreciating and thanking yourself for taking the time to be here this evening. Know that you are contributing to your own health and well-being by taking this time for you. So thanking yourself. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So taking one last breath in. And as you release the breath, begin to wiggle the body, fingers and toes, maybe swaying back and forth, doing any movements that'll help you feel a little more awake and alert. All right. I hope that was good for you. Or at least you got a moment of presence, even if it wasn't good. You know, sometimes it's difficult or our minds have trouble focusing. Every time we do it, it's a little bit different. I think I learned to tell myself, you know, just meet yourself where you are. And sometimes sitting in a body scan is not what I need. And so I moved to other things like doing breath practice, or doing the 2-to-1 breath that we did, or just checking in. So doing what you need, I think, is the most important thing here. So a question that, I invite you to kind of ponder, and we can talk about this, maybe through the Q&A or when we have more of a group discussion, but maybe just thinking about to yourself with what we've talked about with mindfulness, what it is, how it can be useful. How do you think a more mindful version of you would look, would act, would feel like? Like, how would things be different if you were to incorporate some of these mindfulness techniques or more awareness and presence into your life? You can feel free to even answer this in the chat, or like I said, we can kind of have more of an open discussion, or you can journal about this if that's something you like to do. But having this kind of vision of what this could perhaps offer you and your experience can perhaps even be expansive or help you see how this can be useful to you as an individual. So just to recap, I think, just want to read this. Yeah, my mind would slow down and stop spinning. Absolutely. And even, if the mind continues to spin, we're aware that it's spinning and we don't judge ourselves when it does spin, right? We say, oh, this is rumination, or this is me thinking. Interesting. What's something that I need? Or, one of the techniques for me when I notice that my mind is spinning is I just write everything down. I do a brain dump. So I say, I set a timer for 3 minutes and I just write everything on my mind. I just dump it all on the paper. And then sometimes I'll kind of go through this list and I'll pull out some of the things that I said and I'll question, are they true? Or maybe I make a to-do list, or I give myself words of affirmation. So there's different ways that we can look at what we're experiencing. But the first step is always awareness. So thank you for that, for being open to participating. So today we talked a little bit about what mindfulness is, right? The benefits. We did some practical applications like checking in with our thoughts, our body sensations, emotional body, or emotional self rather. We did the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where we checked in with our senses. We did the 2 to 1 breath, where we doubled the exhale to the inhale, which gives you a calming effect on the nervous system. And finally, we did this 4-part body scan. We started with a little bit of deeper than usual breathing. We observed our breath, got into the mindful posture, and then we focused on the sensations in our feet. We moved into the stomach, the chest, and then the jaw. Again, next week we'll do, or in 2 weeks rather, we'll do a little bit more of a wholesome or fulsome body scan, but this was just a shorter version for you today. So as mentioned, our next session is in 2 weeks, and we're going to talk about cultivating mindful self-compassion. And this is about bringing this lens of mindfulness into being more kind to ourselves, right? Being a little bit more compassionate, gentle, treating ourselves like we would a dear friend. And again, this has been a huge and helpful tool on my own journey, learning how to reframe the ways that I talk to myself, the way I think about myself. And when I'm kinder to myself, it doesn't mean I'm more complacent. It just means I start to give myself what I need. I start taking care of myself in a more compassionate way. And it's so, so needed for everyone. So I hope that I'll see you at that one.